play really, really hard, and they execute the system, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
Trust.
He's pretty
Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir. Right on cue. Hey, right on cue. Hey, let me.
We're back on the Jumbo Set podcast. It is Tuesday night, March 5th. Might be listening to this on Wednesday, March 6th. My name is Jake Louque. We are presented by Jimmy's Seafood. Fumbled that out of the gate. And I'm joined on my screen by Spen Rotha. How are we?
Doing quite well. It's been a couple days. We might talk about this more at the back end. We did want to review a movie a month on this. And I know both of us have seen Dune 2. So we won't talk about that yet. And I'm not going to say anything about it, actually, but I'm doing well. That's part of the reason why. I feel like, I don't know. Spring's around the corner. Days are about to get longer. Ready to rock and roll. Got a fresh DC. Here's your ASMR. There you go.
Oh, love that. I've been doing the regular C, actually. Andre Louque keeps those things on him, and I get them nice and cold. I put them in the little mini fridge and just pop down there. I'll have one at lunch usually, and it's delightful. Have that in a sandwich and some chips. Nothing more American than that. Nothing better than that.
I can't even Diet Coke is, I don't know. It's aspartame is what is in it, but whatever they combine in here, I can't even drink normal Coke anymore.
I don't really like this. I don't really like the aspartame, the sweetness. I go for the normal Coke a little bit more. Have you ever had a Mexican Coke?
I have. Those are delicious. Those taste like Diet Cokes.
Yeah. They're like a more intense. They're the water of life version of Diet Coke, is what they are.
Yes. So Kings stay kings. Diet Cokes stay slapping. Yeah. Doing all right. Doing okay. Spring around the corner. Golf game is in shambles, as I've discussed with you. Just back-to-back dog shit rounds for me. Really discouraging. So comes up, comes down. Hopefully there's an upswing coming here soon. Going to get myself a little lessy. Probably right as the season kicks off here. So, yeah.
I'm going to give you a tip but after we get off here. That might help you.
Give me a tip.
Give
me it now.
I didn't want to say it now because it's going to make me sound like a cheese dick, and I assure you it's not that. It's not a mindfulness thing, but like if you take a deep breath before every swing, and I'm not saying this is like a mindfulness, like that kind of present thing. It's more just like let the upper body tension out. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly like archery. Like let the upper body tension out. That'll slow you down a little bit.
It's funny you say that because before this last round, I was super, like I said, I just left I couldn't find where my glove was. I knew I only brought one glove. I usually have like 3 in my bag. And we got there like 10 minutes before the round. We're playing Bay Hills. There's no driving range anyway, drop a couple putts, whatever. Going to the first tee box. No one even behind us. I was like, where's my glove? Where's my glove? Where's my glove? Where's my glove? Couldn't find it for the life of me. Ran to the car real quick, ran back, just worked myself into a nice frenzy. Long story short, it's funny you say that because on the back, I was like, I'm going to make my trigger a deep breath. I'm going to exhale and then start my backswing. And I could feel my tempo and everything, and just my hand-eye a little bit. That's what, same thing. Anything fine hand-eye, you see NBA players all the time when they're shooting a free throw.
Yep. That's been my go. That's been my green light the last couple months, really. I told you I was having the same problem as you with the snap hook there, just fighting that for like a year or so. And then I just started slowing it down, and that was a big help. So yeah, that's a big part of it. But
definitely. And speaking of big help, we can get to the big ticket item, I guess, to jump in here. The Baltimore Ravens have placed the non-exclusive franchise tag on interior defensive lineman Justin Madubuike right ahead of the deadline, which was at 4 p.m. today. The Ravens said, hey, all right, we're going to keep him around. We're going to figure it out. And the sentiment that was pushed out by all of the tweet pushers.
Was it non-exclusive or exclusive?
Excuse me, non-exclusive. Yeah. I believe it was non-exclusive.
The funny thing is we never would have thought of the non-exclusive franchise tag in our life if not for Lamar Jackson. No one ever.
And no non-quarterback gets the exclusive franchise tag. The exclusive franchise tag is pretty much for quarterbacks because, as we know from the Lamar Jackson saga, that if another team were to send an offer sheet to Justin Madubuike and the Ravens do not match it, then they would get 2 first-round picks in exchange, in one this year, one next year. So very uncommon for non-quarterbacks to have that happen.
Right. Yeah, and so the Ravens released a statement today through Eric DaCosta. We were unable to agree on a contract extension with Justin before the deadline and will use the franchise tag. Justin is a great player in person, and we will continue to negotiate a long-term deal. Tag is going to cost them $22.1 million against the cap in 2024. That is if they don't reach a deal with him before July 15th. If they do not, he will play on the tag this season. So per at Ravens Veneer or Ravens Nears on Twitter, Raveneers, who could say really? On Twitter, what's the likelihood of an extension reach being before the draft? That's kind of really the big question here. And we took questions on Twitter. I thought I'd kind of throw that in there into the run sheet as we got into this one, just all encompassing thoughts and really just the main question. Do you think it gets done before July 15th?
I don't think it gets done before free agency. And I don't think Justin Madubuike is in a rush. I think that free agency could be used as a tool to help him see what happens with a Chris Jones contract, what happens with a Christian Wilkins, who was not tagged by the Dolphins and will be one of the bigger free agents. I don't know if I want to say, I think I will say actually, ever. Christian Wilkins is a really good player. He's prime. He is great against the run. He's a great pass rusher. He's versatile. He's a highly regarded person, was really highly sought after coming out of college. He was a high prospect, high production in college at a big program, and then has crushed it in the NFL. So interesting there with the Dolphins, who are in a little bit of a weird cap situation themselves. So I think that Madubuike would benefit from seeing some of those numbers come in. I do think that the Ravens do reach an agreement before July 15th. I believe the Ravens have used the franchise tag 9 times and have come to an agreement on an extension in 7 of those 9 circumstances before the deadline. So that leads me to believe they use it as more of a time buyer than something they do want to deploy with a $22 million cap hit in 2024.
Yeah, that number is just not going to work for anyone, really. I mean, it works for Madubuike in the sense that he's getting, all his money and, up front this year, and that's great, but I'm sure he wants that long-term security. And I'm sure the Ravens don't want to have to deal with that kind of cap charge. So I think whatever they got to do, I do expect it to get done ultimately. But as far as the timing, Raveneers says before the draft, maybe I would expect it to be before that July 15th. The draft, though, I don't know. I could kind of go either way with it. I do expect him to use free agency, maybe as a little bit of that kind of, measuring stick to use it up against to create a new deal. So yeah, once again, I kind of hate to be the we'll see guy, but we will see. I do expect for July 15th. Might not be much earlier than that, though, would be my guess.
Yeah, and something I think is interesting is this sweeping notion that because the cap was $10 million higher than anticipated, that, everybody's got Boku bucks. That money, when you really immediately read about it, even in tweets, the money was quote unquote borrowed from the players union and from the players association and the players. That money it might give you a little bit of flexibility right this second, like just a hair more for one transaction. But the way that player contracts are negotiated are as a percentage of the cap. So it gets eaten right up. And I think a lot of people are anticipating, the team that I like has more cap space than I thought. I'm going to sign this huge free agent. The free agent contracts are going to be bigger. Like every single contract that will be a second contract immediately expands because the cap increases. So it's a little bit of fool's gold, although it does help in the short term a hair. I think that kind of gets blown out of proportion too a little bit, but
I think it's better for re-signing your own players than it is for going onto the market and getting a big player, because all these teams are getting this bump, right? So you'll have more room to negotiate with your own guys and say, hey, like we can bring you back now because of this, but like you're bidding against all these other teams that are getting the same benefit as you. It's like, getting a stimulus check from the government, like everyone's getting it. So it's going to create a little bit of inflation. Obviously, I mean, it's to what degree, who knows? But I think in this case, like it seems pretty, and I'm not an economist. I'm not Eric DaCosta reading your boy there that you were talking about last week necessarily, but it does seem like it's something that is more to be used internally, which would help in this case. But for anyone expecting that to be they're going to re-sign Madubuike, then they're going to go get the big free agent. I'm not sure we're going to see that. We did see some big name franchise tags get thrown around today. Antoine Winfield, Michael Pittman, who was a wide receiver we were talking about. Mike Evans actually got signed to a 2-year deal with the Buccaneers. So that's a name that I was looking at that isn't going to happen, obviously. So I don't know. It's just one of those things where, like I said, I think people are kind of turning their attention within their own building, as they should be right now at this time of year. Free agency doesn't open for a couple of weeks to get deals done with their own guys.
Certainly. And I do think that there are levels to the cap. I think there are flexibilities, and I don't think that maybe some deadlines and some things are as rigid, or there aren't as many mechanisms for teams to work around things. What I'm getting at is that if the Ravens want to sign a player that they think is good value, they're going to be able to do so. And the area that I would anticipate them to really look in free agency is at the offensive line. We heard them, meaning John Harbaugh and Eric DeCosta, like we talked about last week, both say we want to rebuild the offensive line. So when you go look at who's available, Kevin Dotson of the Rams, who is a pretty freaking metal-eating, tough, and relatively athletic, able to get out in space a little bit, guard that had an awesome year on the Rams. Mike Onwenu from the Patriots maybe doesn't quite fit that as much, but he is versatile. So Robert Hunt from the Dolphins. There's not really a premier set of offensive linemen necessarily, and I imagine some of those guys might end up getting signed back with their old team, but I think that's where the Ravens would really like to spend the available free agent dollars in their budget, would be to making sure that they have a veteran presence, that their offensive line is stable, and that maybe they don't feel handcuffed in the draft, which is typically how Ozzie Newsome at least always operated. It felt like the Ravens traditionally have used free agency to plug up the holes, to make sure that they don't have to draft with a hand behind their back. And it's hard to do so anyway when you're not picking at the top of the draft. This is a deep offensive line class, for instance, but I don't know. It's tough to expect the guy picked at 30th to come in and be an impact player. Beat gamer here. You know, there's Tyron Smith. There's a couple really older guys, but I do feel like those keywords, rebuild, mean that they're trying to find long-term answers on their offensive line more so than a Tyron Smith, who is a lot older and has missed time.
Yeah, and I guess that's a good segment. Have you gotten all your thoughts on Madubuike out of the way there?
Not necessarily. I don't know. I really am just curious how it plays out, what he ends up signing for. I'm somewhat surprised they didn't reach a deal. It feels like you don't see too many of those day of deals, so I guess the writing was kind of on the wall. Typically, it feels like those get worked out well ahead of time, but I'm just curious here. I'm curious what that number might be, because it does feel like the Ravens have wanted to extend him since last summer. He shot that deal down. I'm wondering if this is something that is, ludicrous in terms of overall value or what. And it is a little tough. I do think he's an ascending player. I talked about all of that, but I am just very curious. So I really talked about that last week, now that I'm recalling. I'm quite intrigued and maybe a little perplexed at what number it could be, and it might be a lot higher than, I don't know, maybe even I think.
SpotTrack projects it at 4 years, 81.3, which that's a little, it's 20 and change per year, and obviously
I think that the Ravens already offered that. I feel like that's what he didn't take. I feel like it's higher than that.
Probably. That's kind of what I was going to say, because, and obviously you can get a little bit creative with, moving things around, and this cap hit goes here, and maybe they'll get creative with void years. We know we've seen them do that for the first time really in the last couple of years here. So that could be a solution for them. But yeah, that does seem like sort of the low end theory here. Shout out to a Tribe Called Quest as to what he really could get here. I mean, we just see it every year with free agency, man. Like, guys hit the market, and you blow the numbers out of the water, and then you're the next highest paid guy, and then the next offseason, the next guy does it. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so I guess that is kind of full thoughts. We talked about it ad nauseum last week towards the end, but I don't know. I feel like he wants 100 mil. I feel like he wants that extra tier on there. So don't know, but I do think they figure it out before July.
Absolutely. All right, we good on that?
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Shout out, as always, to our sponsors at blackeyedsusanspices.com. Hit them up at blackeyedspices.com, promo code X52 for 10% off, and hit up your participating Ace Hardware locations to find them off the shelves. And, when the cashier rings you up, tell them X52 or the Jumbo Set sent you. I'm sure that, I don't know if it'll get you any money off necessarily, but it's good word of mouth. In fact, that would help us maybe a little bit more than it would help them, because it's word of mouth for the podcast. But I'm rambling. As we move into a little bit of draft talk here, shout out to, you want to plug your new little project there with our guy that you're doing on the draft?
Yeah, you can head over to Road Graders, Cole Jackson's page. We started up a NFL Draft podcast. We had our first episode last week, and we are calling it Making the Jump. We're hoping to do it annually and pick up around this time every year in the thick of the draft season. We just love the draft, and it's a fun outlet. So we wanted to have something consistent where other draft nerds can go. And we did a combine preview, like I mentioned, got into kind of some of the things. What do you look for at the combine? Does it matter? What matters? What doesn't matter? Things of that nature last week. We're going to record again tomorrow. So that episode will be a live stream again tomorrow at 8 p.m., I believe.
Absolutely. So I wanted to give you a chance to do that. I got a chance to listen to some of episode 1 and I enjoyed it. Much more granular, kind of in the weeds draft stuff, which I know a lot of our listeners like. So you will like that. But wanted to touch on the combine, do a little bit of a recap on that. And I guess I'd start us out here with a soundbite from George Kokinis, who's a guy who I really wasn't that familiar with. Like Eric DeCosta mentions him a lot when he's talking to the press about the draft. He was, I forgot what his exact title was before, but with Joe Ortiz off to LA to work for the Chargers, he is now their director of player personnel. And this is a little bit of a soundbite from him on how the Ravens use combine data sort of in concert with tape and when they watch it.
Well, I think anybody that knows me, they know I love watching offensive linemen for whatever reason. And then when they come out here, everybody seems to be disinterested, so to speak, because they're not running in the 4.2s and the 4.3s. But I love watching the linemen work out. I mean, you get to see what you don't see on tape a little bit in terms of movement. And so some people would say, well, if you're not seeing it on tape, what's the difference? But that's the point. You don't see it on tape. So sometimes there's different offenses. They get the ball out quick. You can't even really see the linemen move around. Like, how do they recover? The bubble screen. Sometimes you see them always in a 2-point stance, and here you get to see them in a 3-point stance. How do they step? Come out of that 3-point step with a 3-point stance and come out with power and be able to turn the corner. So there's definitely things you can see out here in the workout that you don't see with linemen. So I really like that. And of course, the defensive backs, everybody wants to see how fast they are, but there are times on tape where you can go 4 or 5 games where you don't see the ball thrown at a player. Mm-hmm. So how do you really assess their ball skills? So something through the combine, you can see how the guy approaches the ball, how soft his hands are. Is he confident in his hands? Can he track the ball? That sort of thing. And sometimes it just helps you fill some gaps in the evaluations.
I feel like I hear you and Cole talk about this a lot. And, I break down highlights to the extent that I can. And, you guys have gotten me access to tape and stuff over the years, and I've used it sparingly. How much of that sounds familiar to you? Because I feel like you guys talk a lot about how the combine is, and people read into it, and for good fun reasons, but people maybe read into it too much one way, or they don't give it enough credit. How much stock do you give the combine overall? And I guess for your general thoughts on this combine, what'd you take away from it?
The combine serves as a pillar of comparison over time. It serves as an ability to go through databases and refine. And I like it because it's consistent. It's consistent testing. And I listen to Mike Mayock, who people love to sneer at because he had, an unsuccessful tenure. But Chris Long's podcast, the Greenlight podcast, Mike Mayock was asked by Chris Long, do you think players are getting faster, or do you think they're getting better at the 40, for instance? And Mike Mayock said, that's a great question. I think they're getting better at the 40. He cited his experience where he never ran track. He was never in a 3-point stance. He played quarterback and safety in high school, then played defensive back only in college. So he said, I have never put my hand in the dirt as long as I've played football. He said he played baseball at Boston College as well, never ran track. And his junior year, he ran a 4.78. After his senior year, he went and worked out with the track team and then ran a 4.56. And he said that's a overview of, things like that. But I like it for comparison's sake. I like things specifically. This is maybe too much of a microcosm. From this example, Romo Dunes is doing backflips all over the field. He's doing gainers. He stays after and runs the 3-cone 15 times after everyone leaves.
Rome after dark.
Exactly. It definitely was a little bit of showmanship of, Malik Neighbors and
little look at me. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. But it also shows hey, I love to compete. I am competitive. I like to play ping pong. If I play ping pong, I like to win at ping pong. If I'm playing poker, I want to win. If we're, flicking a bottle cap at a glass, I want to be the one that hits it the most times or the first time. things like that. And I think those are fun. Those are the kind of guys you want your team built around, right? Guys that just love to compete no matter what. Those are the kind of guys that might remain unchanged if they get paid $30 million. And they might remain unchanged if they get paid $30 million and then $100 million over time. So I love the competitive nature of it. I don't think it matters, but I do hate when guys sit out on drills. Like Orlando Brown Jr., for instance, he was slow as shit and he ran the 40 and he was like, screw it. I'm going to go compete. I'm going to go do it. And it ended up maybe plummeting his draft stock, maybe costing him some money, but it did show I like to compete. I like to do what everybody's doing in my sport. I want to go out there and see what I can do and push myself. So I love that aspect of it. And there are thresholds, like outside line pass rushers, edge rushers that jump 35 inches vertically and 10 feet in broad jump and run under a 4.65 and have under a 1.6 10-yard split. Very often, 3-cone is under 6'9". There is a very high correlation. If you take that set of guys that accomplish those things, they average more sacks, more pressures. They start more games. They have a higher AV. Offensive linemen that are really quick in the short shuttle. That's an offensive lineman's life, right? Can you have really quick feet and kind of adjust super quickly? Have a really high threshold. So you go look at a Tanner Bordolini out of this draft class that ran a superb, I think it was like what was his short shuttle, like 4.28, something like that. Had a 7.16 3-cone at 300 pounds. So that's awesome. He can change direction. He can run and move. And Troy Fontenot, who didn't do some of those drills, but you can just see the movement skill, right? You can see everybody up close and in person. And even on TV, I haven't been to the combine, but you can just see the way guys move openly. And it provides fun context. If you go look at like a DK Metcalf, who, and everyone's going to think of 3-cone when I mention his name in combine, but I was going to say he was in a system at Ole Miss where he ran 3 routes. So what does he look like running some of these other routes? What does it look like outside when you remove them from their college, from their scheme, and all these things? So I think some people put too much stock into it. Some people don't put enough into it. It's just nice. It helps provide context, and it can point out an area where you're like, oh, shoot, this edge rusher had a dog crap 3-cone and all his agilities were really bad. I didn't really see that on tape. Now I need to go back and look at it. And is that an issue that I just didn't kind of really pick up on? He just never tried. And you're like, oh, shoot, he has really tight ankles. Oh, shoot, maybe that changes the way I would use him. So I think that the combine and the data of yards per route run or pressures or this side of it, there's kind of 3 phases. There's the playing data, the measurements and combine kind of data, and then there's the tape. And they help each other. They all should work in unison to provide context. So that's why I like it. It kind of helps you check your blind spots and go back with context. So I think that's why the combine's awesome. And I don't know. I like the Olympics. I think the Olympics are cool. And it's just like track and field, right? They're not throwing a javelin or anything, but hey.
The underwear Olympics, some call it.
Yeah, it is. Hey, who can freaking jump out of the gym? Who's got a 42-inch vertical? Hey, Ricky Pearsall, white boy, got hops. Man, he can go freaking run and jump and show how impressive of an athlete he is, regardless of football or not. So I think that stuff's fun too. And it's kind of just like watching, the Olympics in a way, and it's of your favorite sport. So Kyle Hamilton did ask a question. I feel like he's like Marlon Humphrey's
coming out of the shell. It's starting.
He's Marlon Humphrey's like cooler younger brother. Like, I feel like he's immediately like his questions he asks have actual substance and aren't just random. And he said on Twitter, he goes, serious question. Why does the NFL combine matter so much more than MLB or NBA? Like, why the NFL combine? Because they have combines for basketball and stuff. And I don't know, it kind of put my brain in a blender. I was trying to think through it and was like, I don't know, I guess just more athleticism is required in the sport, but is it? And that's an offensive thing to say. And I was going to say, like, I don't know, maybe baseball is a little bit more about like hand-eye coordination and like some particular postures and things than it is about athleticism. But, you don't want to knock one way or the other. So it's an interesting question. But at the end of the day, I think it's important to be able to get as much information about a player that is possible, because you play less games and it's tougher. the NFL, there's not as much reps in games to be able to see full speed. Like in basketball, a rookie can really struggle for a while. Like I think of like Grady Dick this year in the NBA. He's a first-round pick. He's in the G League. You know, he comes up. He's getting his minutes increased. You can really see him in game circumstances. So I feel like all of the information you get prior to the draft it helps you try to figure it out sooner because you just don't get as much time in the NFL. You know, it might take you 3 years to develop a young NFL player, and that's only like 40-something games. Whereas in the NBA, you're playing that, you know, MLB, NBA, you're playing a lot more games. So I guess just more data and more analysis to help you find those blind spots, like I said.
Yeah, definitely. It's one game a week. I think that is a big part of it. And, you know, it's interesting. It's really like, it's the job interview, right? Like the tape that you put out there and your measurables, those are kind of that's your resume and your qualifications on your resume. And that is certainly one part of the interview process. But then, you know, you can go into a job and have a, you know, maybe a not great interview, but if your resume and your qualifications are there, maybe that'll weigh yourself a certain way against other candidates. And I really do think it is just kind of a test, man. I think back to that Johnny Manziel documentary where he was like, I was just drinking like gallons of water a day to like flush the mushrooms and like alcohol out of my system because like I had the combine coming up. And he went in there and he did a really good job in the interview process, apparently. And he really impressed some people, and that probably raised his draft stock up a little bit. And he was a very volatile prospect for a lot of different reasons. So, you know, it's just one of those things where if the tape isn't there, if the measurables aren't there, you can get to those interview rooms and you could really sell yourself on some teams in a big way. And that's a good way to show that you understand the intellectual side of it too, which is breaking down tape and getting on the whiteboard and talking to some of these guys and having some of these guys grill you, maybe in some not super appropriate ways sometimes, as stories have come out over the last couple of years. And but you know, ultimately at the end of the day, that's what it is. It's just showing that you have your head on straight and you know not to have X thing in your system, whether it's illicit, you know, activities or whatever, or whether it's some sort of steroid you're using to try to bulk up. Can you meet deadlines? Can you get yourself in shape? Can you get yourself mentally ready to go up in front of that whiteboard ahead of it? It is really fascinating to me. And as fun as it is, that's a really big part of the process is, you know, just figuring out what's between these guys' ears too, as much as it is the physical stuff, which I find really fascinating. Another soundbite from Kokinis. I kind of wanted to lump this in with Cliff Brown had a nice piece on the Ravens website, which you can go check out, sort of his 10 takeaways. He seemed really focused on kind of and I think he was there, and he seemed pretty focused on kind of the mid-tier, mid-round offensive linemen. And then George had a nice little soundbite where he was talking about them and cornerbacks as well.
You know, that we talked about that a little bit earlier. Offensive linemen, a lot of these spread formation teams are like in a 2-point stance, and you know, you're watching the offensive lineman, you can't even see the footwork because the video is going out to the bubble screen all the time. So you can't really see, you know, how a guy starts and stops, you know, as a lineman, you know, is he finishing blocks, that sort of thing. And really from a defensive standpoint too, like if it's a, you know, pure pass rusher and the guy's has to get 1 second to get to the quarterback, you're not really seeing that often if the ball gets out of their hands. So you got to evaluate what you can evaluate and then fill in the blanks. But you know, in that case, like, does a defensive player turn and run and go chase the guy down? So you just look for other things that may present itself and then just grind through all the tape and see the different situations and see if you can evaluate everything you need to evaluate based off all the games that you get.
How much of the weirdness of these offenses affects the way that you break down this tape? And I guess like I did want to ask about offensive linemen, but just generally, how much does that affect it? And are you kind of looking at some of these mid-tier guys that Cliff was talking about offensive line wise? Because I know you mentioned wanting to grab one in free agency, or them maybe wanting to. Thoughts on all that?
Yeah, I think that, so I'll start out with the offensive line aspect. I think that there are a lot of really experienced offensive linemen. This is kind of the end. It's not the complete end, but this is kind of the end of the extended COVID eligibility, where it was like medical red shirt, medical red shirt, extra year. You know, there's some 23 and 24-year-olds.
We got some guys in year 9.
I'm sorry?
We got some guys entering like year 9 in college.
Yeah, there's still some of those, and it's like ridiculous, and you can joke about it. But offensive line is something where you do want more reps, more experience. They've seen more fronts, more defenses. So I think that this is a great class because of that. There's a lot of really good, experienced offensive linemen, like a guy, Michael Juergens out of Wake Forest. I don't even think he got invited to the combine. He's a Damascus guy. I've met him a couple times.
Any relation to Cam?
No relation to Cam. No relation to Cam. But he was all ACC and is like he's played center, he's played guard, he can play tackle. He's 6'6", he's 315 pounds. He has played like a couple thousand snaps, and he's probably going to be like a 4th, 5th round pick that could play center or guard. And he has a ton of experience. So I think that is thick in this class. I think there is a nice. It's felt like the last couple years have been a little bit bare in terms of depth of the offensive line later rounds, especially at tackle. And I think that has some of the reason to do why guys wanted to develop more, get their degrees, like things of that nature. So I'm excited for that offensive line class in that regard. There's a ton of like really athletic guards in this class and interior offensive linemen too, where it's felt like it's been a little bit thinner in many circumstances of the last couple of years here. So all of those things considered. And then what was the first part we were talking about?
Just in general, like how did I'm just more
schemes.
Yeah, scheme. Like, how does that affect? Because so Cliff is calling out some like Roger Rosengarten, Frank Crum, I think was another guy, and he's saying these guys are coming from schools with like maybe some weird offenses, or maybe I'm just mixing that up with what George said. But like, how much does that affect like an offensive line evaluation? Because it seems like it has to be relevant with the way that like a lot of these teams really are just running that spread, get the ball and go, bubble screens, that kind of stuff.
Definitely. So I think that one of my favorite phrases, I guess, overall in the draft is just because they didn't doesn't mean they can't. So you don't want that. And I mentioned DK Metcalf playing in Frank Longo's offense. Just because he wasn't targeted over the middle of the field doesn't mean he can't play over the middle of the field. Like can't run some digs and things like that. AJ Brown, same offense, same question, very fluid mover. So that again is why I think the Senior Bowl, the East-West Shrine, all of those all-star showcases plus the combine do matter. Like he said, can this guy flip his hips and drop into coverage? We never saw him do it. He was never asked to. And another part is that same Kyle Hamilton question. You want to feel like you fall in love with the guy, the interviews and things like that too. You want to feel like I fall in love with the guy way more so. And the other thing I didn't realize when I was thinking about it too, like I think rookies and first and second year players matter more in the NFL than they do in other sports. While there are more players, you're dedicating a really strong resource to those guys. So that's why it's important to figure out what were they not asked to do versus what do I not think they can do, or what do they need to develop at? Can I coach that out of him? Or is that an Achilles heel that I don't think I'll be able to get out of that player? So trying to define what I do know versus what I don't know. And if I don't know, is it a can't or a didn't? And seeing whatever I can get out of those showcase games or the combine athletically, or asking the guy, hey, what do you know about run? In high school, did you run gap scheme? Tell me about this on counter. Tell me about that. Can you get on the whiteboard and draw counter up for me if you never ran counter in college? Like things of that nature. What do you know about the drop back steps correlated to some of these other things? A lot of teams don't go under center, and the NFL is having an under center renaissance right now. So all of those things are just context you need to find out about. And it can suck. I mean, watching tape, when you get one of those spread schools, when you get like the Cliff Kingsbury style offense, it can get really boring. If you're trying to watch especially even on the other side, if you're like, okay, I'm going to watch this corner play, the Texas Tech teams from a couple years ago. It's like, it's hard to have takeaways from that game. So you're like, is there a true rep? Is there a true pass set? Is there a true drop back? Or is it all just pop, 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 one step, getting into these weird games. So definitely all things that make evaluation a crapshoot in ways. And again, that's why I think the combine is important, to just see if you can get any confident answers to help in your analysis and evaluation of a player.
Yeah, and I think that certainly will come into factor with some of these wide receivers who I wanted to hit on before we move on from the combine. Adonai Mitchell, 6'4", ran a 4.34. I mean, that is like freakish shit right there. I think you were maybe throwing some Dez comps out, or maybe that was somebody else. You mentioned O'Dunes. I think he had a decent time as well. I don't have it in front of me. And then Xavier Worthy from Texas as well. I think he tied the record, was it? Or did he break it? Was it a 4.21 after I think a 4.25 unofficial, which is freakish shit. He's 6'1", scheduled to meet with the Ravens per Ryan Fowler in one of their top 30 visits.
Yeah, Xavier Worthy broke the record at 4.21. Brian Thomas 4.33. Adonai Mitchell 4.34. Tez Walker 4.36. Jacob Cowing 4.38. Roman Wilson 4.39. Ladd, Julian Edelman, Cooper Kupp, McConkey 4.39. Way faster.
Dude, it's Ryan Gosling with the Jenga tower. Boom, 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 and then that happens, and they all fall down.
Yep. Xavier Leggett 4.39. Anthony Gould, who's more of a returner, 4.39. Troy Franklin 4.41. Ricky Pearsall 4.41. Those are fast guys.
This is going to happen. You said this was going to happen, that these guys are just going to be growing on trees this year.
They are. Jermaine Burton, who can fly at Alabama, 4.45. And he is the 16th fastest receiver in the 40. Odunze ran 4.45 with a 1.52 split. 1.52 split is much more impressive than a 4.45, so he can get off the line of scrimmage. He ran that at 2.12, 6'3", with 32-inch arms, 39-inch vertical, 10.4 broad jump, 6.88 three-cone drill, 4.03 on the short shuttle. Those are crazy numbers at his size. I think he was like the 17th highest relative athletic score ever, considering his size, everything weighted equally. And Lance Zierlein has a Larry Fitzgerald comp on him, and I love that. That's an uncommon comp. Tons of guys. I mean, Johnny Wilson is 6'7", 6'6", 230 with 35-inch arms and ran 4.52 with a 1.55 split and a 37-inch vertical. And, you know, again, tape is what matters too, if not more, at least just as much. But this receiver class is definitely loaded. Definitely a lot of different skill sets. It feels like there's a lot of guys that are going to be pick'ems. I think that Brian Thomas and Adonai Mitchell have similar athletic profiles and skill sets to a degree. So that's an interesting conversation for a team to have. Which one do we like more? If you're on the board and you're like, well, we really want a receiver, and there's these two guys, they're both tall, they're both fast as shit, they both can go up and get the football. Those two. Then you go look at Troy Franklin and Xavier Worthy. While the 40 is not, you know, quite the same, Franklin does appear pretty freaking fast on tape and has crazy high play speed. Those guys, tall, slender, dropped a lot of passes. Maybe not, you know, tough physical guys that go over the middle, but they could be that Z flanker that takes the top off, and you can manufacture them some touches, and, you know, they get cushions and force certain kind of coverages at times. So I would say even Roman Wilson, you know, has a somewhat similar profile to Ladd McConkey. Roman Wilson comes in at 5'11", 185, loves the block, very physical. Ladd McConkey comes in at 6 foot, 186. They both run 4.39. So a lot of pick'ems. You can go talk about like Keon Coleman versus his teammate, Johnny Wilson, big jump ball guys. All these guys, and we're not even talking about the top two that are having all the debates going into the combine were Malik Neighbors or Marvin Harrison Jr., and people were getting sick of that. And now no one's talking about either of them because, you know, they weren't really a part of the activity, the event that just happened last week. But a really fun class. A lot of outside guys, too. It feels like the last couple of years there's been a lot of slot guys, and guys are like, oh, well, they're not an X. They're not. X-wise, you've got the two that we mentioned, Neighbors and Marvin Harrison Jr. Odunes can play there. Adonai Mitchell can probably play there. Xavier Leggett, Ricky Pearsall, I mean, Cornelius Johnson. There's a ton of them, a ton. The other Washington receivers, McMillan and Polk, both can probably give you a little bit of that. So a lot of big body guys, a lot of pick'ems, and a class where maybe this is the class, again, where the third round is like, all right, you know, teams aren't, I don't think how many teams would you say? I haven't looked at rosters and done it as a whole exercise, but it feels like teams maybe aren't as desperate in that room as they were a couple years ago. And there have been a lot of guys drafted high and signed a big contract. So this could be the final, the bubble might burst this year, might finally burst, especially with so many offensive linemen, because I do think finding 320-pound guys that can move well is a more rare skill set than a 6'5" guy who's really, really, really athletic and can catch the football. So I could see the linemen pushing the receivers, if you want to make that offensive investment, back a little bit more. And maybe we see another, what was it? The Garrett Wilson year where it was Olave, Wilson. There was like 6 receivers went in like 10 picks in the top of the first round. I don't foresee that being the occasion again, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, it does feel like, it's time to get our life vest and get out. I mean, seriously, I feel like I'm financially inside of you or something.
There you go. Your bubble's finally bursting.
Yeah, jack to the tits. That's where that's from.
Yep.
Yeah, I had to get that in there. But yeah, man, you're absolutely right. Options upon options upon options upon options. It's so much fun with the combine when this type of thing happens. And I think you're right. I think it's lining up value wise, and teams just have enough of these guys where maybe some of them are going to fall to you. I'm of the opinion on day 1 or 2, grab one of them and let them lead you to paradise. I'm into it. So I guess that's all we got from the combine. I want to go through some questions.
Yeah, definitely. We got Boyce Evans while you're pulling that up in the chat here. Apparently he can broad jump 35 inches. Very impressive.
Well, he put the comment in there saying mine's 35 inches horizontally. I was curious what he was talking about.
Whoa, laying down the hammer.
Clarify.
Dante Yates says Ravens love players from the Senior Bowl. They do.
Yeah, they had
again, I feel like that is because they like a more complete evaluation with less question marks, and the Senior Bowl helps you do that.
Yeah, they've got the Phil Savage connection too. He's still running it, right? Or is that somebody else now?
The Senior Bowl is run by Jim Nagy, who his dad originally, but I think Phil Savage might still be involved.
Yeah. He was kind of the godfather of it at first there.
He was the executive director before. I think Nagy is now the director. And then he was like the GM for the Hot Shots in the USFL or whatever it was called.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was a Ravens guy, Browns guy for a couple of years. So yeah, they had that connection. Got a couple. We already answered a few of these, but let's go through it. Any dream day 2 selections for you?
I mean, I'm not quite at that point where I really am dialed in on slotting guys, but I do really like Ricky Pearsall a lot. Day 2 wise, I don't know. Not ready to answer that question.
I think you got to pick for a need between maybe something on defense, whether it's corner or edge or offensive lineman in first, and then maybe grab one of these guys that falls on day 2. I like the idea of that.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot.
I should clarify.
Running backs are somewhere I'm curious about as well.
Yeah. Strength and vision. Any hopes of Ben Cleveland having a Ben Powers-like contract year at guard? I'm a little dubious on this. I just feel like Ben Powers kind of slowly developed in the background, and I don't know, some of the stuff we've heard about Ben Cleveland, it's not really a physical thing. He's just got to kind of get
mature,
get marching in line here a little bit. So I think they're going to throw him in the mix. I do think they'll give him a chance in over the summer. They'll give him a shot, but he's going to have some competition.
I think that he might play better on the right side. I read somebody did an analysis of, because we always talk about, oh, well, this guy will just play. He'll just switch positions. He'll be a right guard now when he was on the left side. I think that 45% of players switched sides in the NFL over a 10-year period. And 70% of those switches were from the left side to the right side. So it's less common for Cleveland, a player that played on the right side, to switch to the left side, which is where the competition has been. So it does feel like Cleveland is the contingency plan at right guard, which is now vacant with Zeitler hitting the market. And seemingly, I would assume because of the dead cap, that the Ravens are just fully done with him. So I could see it. And what we have kind of heard through the grapevine is that I don't want to say he's last guy in, first guy out, but that, maybe there was a concern in the draft with him that he was a guy that liked football and didn't love it. And I think the Ravens have not found that to be untrue thus far and would like to see him buy in, like you said, Jake, a little bit more and want to be first guy in, last guy out. Especially, this is going to be a contract year for him. What is this? His third year?
He's a 2021 guy, and he was a third rounder. So, yeah.
Yeah, so this is his contract year, I believe. And hey, if you want to make some money, now's the time. And we've seen that happen before. And I think that is what happens, right? The Ravens are hoping Rashad Bateman. Now, if he doesn't get his 5th year picked up, it's going to be a contract year for him too. And you're hoping that motivates the player to perform beyond what they have previously and dedicate and play through some injuries and things like that more than they normally would.
Good segue. Josh Elliott, last one here. Acquire a wide receiver 2 or ride with Bate and just get depth behind him. So I guess by depth he means like a decently high draft pick. But what do you think about signing that wide receiver 2? I think we're both in favor of it, but you don't want it to be cost prohibitive.
I don't know who that would be. is the issue.
I'm kind of wondering, are they just going to bring back Beckham? Because like, is Beckham going to hit the market and realize that he's not going to get this money that he's seeking, but he still wants to play and they can get something affordable done? I wouldn't be totally against that and still draft a guy.
I'm just unsure what receiver. Mike Evans was tagged. T. Higgins sounds like a tag and trade. Marquise Brown is a free agent. I don't foresee that.
A lot of chitter chatter about that on the old Bird box.
Calvin Ridley feels like might be. I mean, those guys probably are going to get $60 million. I feel like, and then there's kind of this fall off. There's only a couple guys, and the 1-year contract ordeals are very expensive, which means that the Ravens will probably have to commit to a 3-4 year contract. Do you want to do that with any of those guys? That's going to be a lot of money, a lot of cash right now. There's really a huge cliff among PFF's wide receiver or top free agent board. I think the last one I saw might have been, I can't even find it now. It's so high up. The last one that I found was Calvin Ridley is the 25th ranked free agent. And I'm in the 60s here now, and I don't see another. So Marquise Brown, Calvin Ridley, and I don't know that there's a wide receiver too. Darnell Mooney is the next one. Gabe Davis, another one. I don't know. Then Odell Beckham's there. Those are guys in the 60s, and then Odell Beckham is 70. So
I'd be fine with. I mean, those guys are still kind of young. Like, I wouldn't hate that if it's affordable.
Yeah, Mooney's can create some separation stuff.
I loved Mooney when he was on his Linsanity run with the Bears a couple years ago.
Yeah, he can create separation a little bit. Gabe Davis is a weird player. He's kind of a height, speed, field stretcher, kind of like Marquez Valdez-Scantling. I think those are two very similar players, and I think Scantling got like a 3-year, $30 million deal from the Chiefs 2 years ago, so maybe we see Davis get like a 3-year, 37 or something.
I'm into that too. Like, I saw somebody tweet, like, it's a little ridiculous that Lamar Jackson, if you were to put him in the room with the wide receivers, he'd be the tallest guy. Like,
yeah,
we just keep doing that. Like, maybe let's diversify the deck a little bit here.
Yeah, I tweeted the other day, and if I would have changed my wording of it, I got a bunch of Lamar lovers that, were like,
yeah.
They're like, in college, his receivers were all tall. I'm like, all right, we're talking about fucking
well, he was great in college.
2 and 3-star Louisville receivers that he had nothing to do with versus them being like, hey, Lamar, who do you want? He was like, Jerry Jeudy or Hollywood Brown. Everyone's like, well, that's because they're from South Florida. I was like, well, they also both happen to be thinner and kind of separation oriented more so than physical and all those things. But yes, I agree. And
it's because they're from Florida. Maybe like we've used that a couple times now. Maybe we can expand the criteria is the argument I'm making. Like it's cool that they're boys and all. Like, I love that, but like, maybe let's get out there and explore the world a little bit,
Yeah. So it said Ryan Fowler source, the Ravens are expected to host Xavier Worthy on a top 30 visit. I said, Worthy is a baller. And does Lamar Jackson just hate big body receivers? Despise the words they despise big body receivers. What I should have said is, does Lamar strongly prefer quicker, shiftier guys than big body targets? And I feel like he does on the outside.
Yeah, somebody made a good point that he doesn't seem to like the uncertainty of a jump ball. Like, he seems to like to have a strike zone in front of him that he can fire it in there too. He doesn't love like just chucking.
His misses are long when the receiver wins. They're rarely underthrown back shoulder. He doesn't seem to really like that a lot. And I think it's because he's very turnover adverse as a thrower. And he's so athletic that he can take his time, see things play out a little bit more. And he has such a strong arm that he can hit guys. And that's why Hollywood Brown was sick, because he was such a lethal deep ball tracker and could hit another gear and go catch a ball that most guys couldn't. I think that Keith Williams said he had who's the best deep tracker that he's ever seen in his life. He was really good at that and still had a low completion percentage on those deep throws. Everyone's like, Lamar can't throw. And it's like, I feel like he just doesn't like DBs to have a shot at it.
I loved Eric DeCosta's reaction to Worthy's 40 time. He looked like he had to hose himself down there.
He was licking his lips. He looked really old there. He looked like old Clint Eastwood kind of. He was like,
he must have run out of Coca-Cola in the hotel room there.
Probably.
Yeah.
Need to get that man a cold C there.
Yeah, we need to get them on board. Sponsor the pod, Coca-Cola, of all the shout outs you're getting tonight.
Yeah, exactly. What are you guys doing? We'll get Mexican Coke specifically to come on.
Honestly, that could be a good way into the business model. I like that.
It certainly could. Any questions here in the chat? Let's see. Brian Helmkamp, who gets restructured to save money? I would assume not Ronnie Stanley, because you don't want to keep pushing money into the future with him. I would assume probably Lamar number one quickly, I think, is the easiest one. I feel like we will see that ahead of free agency to get compliant or whatever they need. And then
I was wondering about Andrews. That could be interesting. I don't know like what the specifics on that could be, but like he extended a couple of years ago, and these tight end deals are starting to get more expensive. It could be a fortuitous way to get more cash in his hand now and, extend him and then free up some cap space. I don't know. I'm not Brian McFarland here, but maybe that could be one.
Yeah, I would say the ones that I think are least likely are probably Marcus Williams and Ronnie Stanley, because availability has been an issue. And if either one of them are to suffer another high-level injury or catastrophic injury, then you're stuck with that dead cap. So I would think that puts Lamar Jackson number one, probably Mark Andrews number two. He did just have an injury, but I feel like, I don't know. Lamar number one, probably Roquan Smith number two, and then a toss-up between Andrews and Humphrey, who both are coming off of injury-riddled seasons as well. So kind of weird there when you think about it. Really, Lamar and Roquan, of their high cap hit guys that have restructure ability, are the only two that have been healthy over the last, you only get like 5 big contracts on a given roster, and it feels like they're pretty tapped out on that number already. So it's those kind of the 5 names are really the ones that probably could help you. So maybe it'll be one of those guys. Yeah, and again, I do think that the Ravens are going to try and look at Ronnie Stanley and Marcus Williams and be like, look, boys, love you. Appreciate everything you've done. We've paid you a lot of cash already. I had the numbers a couple episodes ago. I think Ronnie Stanley here has been paid $97 million so far that he has been paid out, minus Uncle Sam, before Uncle Sam. And then we have Marcus Williams here has been paid out as a safety, $48 million in cash. I love you, boys. We've paid you really well. We would like to keep you. Can we talk about, your kind of value on the free agent market right now? And would you be willing to maybe take a little bit of a pay cut? And we could give you some bonus money right now, the restructure, cut you a check today, and then give us a little bit more breathing room. I think you need to have that conversation with those guys. And I don't know. I don't know how drastic the Ravens would get. I don't know that they would cut Ronnie Stanley. If they're trying to rebuild their offensive line, that would be like a complete remodeling. That would be a demolition of the offensive line, more so than a rebuild. And Marcus Williams, I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you. Can you help us out a little bit? So Absolutely. That's the approach I'd take, at least.
Okay. We all tapped out on questions?
Yeah, from what I saw.
Okay. Anything else before we get out of here?
Free agency coming up. Cole and I will be doing offensive line this week and checking that out, talking post-combine, getting into some offensive line tape. I think he wanted to start with the tackles, so we'll go talk about that. Definitely a polarizing position, and I feel like a lot of the Ravens Twitter and a lot of listeners are curious about what the Ravens do at tackle. Morgan Moses, obviously an older player coming off of a torn pec. Ronnie Stanley's injury issues well documented. We just talked about him a little bit, so you can go check that out on Cole's page, Road Graders. Check out the Making the Jump podcast. We just had our first episode last week, and we'll recap the combine there. That'll be live tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Feel free to hop in with us.
Absolutely. Okay. And we can close the show out now, I guess, with a little Dune 2 chatter.
We can. So if you are listening and you do not want Dune 2 spoiled for yourself, this is me saying, stop listening. Do not spoil Dune. I hate when people spoil movies for me. I do my best to avoid any sort of spoiler. Rotten Tomatoes, I don't like to see it. If Oppenheimer, I ruined for myself. I saw the Rotten Tomato right before I saw it.
Well, there's a pretty clearly delineated point of history that I think they were driving towards there.
Huh?
We won World War II because of the bombs. They were dropped on 2 cities, whole big thing. They tested it in the desert, in the Trinity tests.
Are you saying that because I know the result that I was not as blown away?
Yeah, you're probably. I don't know specifically what you had spoiled. We don't have to reveal that.
Oh, no. So I just saw the Rotten Tomato on it when I was buying my tickets. So I was like, oh, it's a 99. Wow, this better be the best movie ever. And then the entire time in my head, I was just like, I'm going to find reasons why. Like subliminally, I was just like, I'm going to find reasons why this movie's not a 99.
You were a little cool on that, I remember. Yeah, we kind of delineated there.
I'm just a jerk and I'm annoying. And if you tell me something is perfect, then I'm going to find reasons it's not. And if you tell me something's not perfect, I'm going to find reasons why. If you would have told me Oppenheimer was a 70, I would have been like, you're an idiot. It's a 99.
I did the same. So I actually had the same thought going into this because the reviews for Dune Part 2 came out and they were overwhelmingly positive. And there were some voices that I was a little dubious of. Jeff D. Lowe, shout out to him. He was huge on Dune Part 1 in a way that I wasn't. I love Dune Part 1, but it was
good. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it was very good. But it was a little incomplete, right? And I think the picture was fully completed with this one. I mean, this is one of the best movies I've ever seen. Like full stop. Not just action movies, not just sci-fi movies. I mean, this is amazing. Probably the best theater experience I've ever had. I think you had the same take.
It was the best movie that you could possibly. I don't think you could see a better movie in a theater with a gigantic widescreen and robust sound and the ability to just completely suck into the theater experience. And I saw Infinity War was, that was cool to see in theater for that reason, things like that. But the narrative structure of this, and I haven't read the books, but the unpredictability of it, the absences of sound at times, like when the Harkonnens are jettisoning down and then jettisoning back up onto the mountain, absence of sound there in the desert in those early moments was as well constructed in terms of ambient sound and things like that, and kind of that void that as like when the Harkonnen gladiator scene, whenever it's roaring and thumping and it's loud. So the audio mixing I thought was the best I've ever heard in any project of anything ever. It was awesome to hear, let alone see.
Yeah, and I've read the first two books, which are going to comprise the three movies here. They've all but confirmed they're going to do Dune Messiah as the second book. That's basically going to comprise the third movie, I think, is their plan. And yeah, part 1 and 2, they're kind of combining to make up the first book, which I read after I saw the first one, and I really enjoyed it. But it is hard to adapt. Famously, it was thought for a long time in Hollywood that it's an unadaptable piece of work, and I get why they think that, because it's so much about like the ecology of the planet is kind of how they talk about it environmentally, and the fact that it's a desert and like you can't really like do anything with it, but it's super important because of like the spice and how that's kind of the economic driver of like not only just that planet or a cluster of planets, but the entire galaxy, because it allows for like interstellar travel. And that's going to be a hilarious part of Dune Messiah, because they introduce what's called a guild navigator, which is a fish man in a tank who has like telepathic abilities. So I'm very, very excited to see Steve Buscemi play that role in Dune Messiah. But no, man. Yeah, I think you're right. I think the audio was amazing, and the way that they mixed that together, and kind of how they really picked up right after Dune Part 1 to open the movie with they're taking Jamas's body back to the Fremen Seeks, the guy that Paul murked at the end of the first one with the knife fight there. And yeah, just kind of the action sequences and how they build it up initially with Paul is he's still kind of he's still finding his footing a little bit. He's not like totally combat ready still, even after killing Jamas. And over the course of the movie, how they build him up and getting more combat experience. And then by the end, after he's drank the water of life and everything, and he's just turned into a complete just psychopath warlord, and he's uniting the Fremen in the South, which is, that scene is one of the best scenes of like any movie. Like it's hard to really put into words how amazing that was when he goes into that kind of meeting hall and they've got the light filtering down, and he's just like, it's a gear that I did not know Timothée Chalamet had. I was skeptical that he'd be able to pull
the intensity that he brought to that and the strength that he was able to portray was fantastic.
Yeah, and the sound mixing with him like using the voice, which is basically like, if anyone is Dune curious and doesn't really know, and if you're listening to this, we've kind of already spoiled it, so maybe hopefully you're not. But if anyone is curious about why Star Wars looks the way that it does, and it has like the Force, and it's got like all these kind of mystical elements to it, I think George Lucas has pretty much admitted that a lot of Star Wars was kind of ripped right out of the Dune book.
The voice is the Force, and yeah, I think that it was mixed well, and the intensity he brought there. And then just the movies tend to be colorized with orange and blue as the primary overtures, which it tests the best on posters and trailers. Transformers and Michael Bay was kind of what brought that to life. And that is such a strong element of the desert and of the eyes and all of those things. So then the switch up to the Harkonnen world of black and white and the fireworks and the special effects and the visuals that they were able to create were so contrasting and so vivid and shaded well and perfectly. The mise-en-scène of everything was just, you find your eyes wandering around every detail and how perfect it appeared and natural, and it just completely immersed you in that world, which was one of the coolest visual experiences. Just the black and whites there felt, I don't even know how to properly articulate, but the depth of the black and white was so powerful that it was one of the most visually stimulating things I've ever seen in my life, and really felt like an entire different movie for a little bit, and just was so well done that it was absurd.
Yeah, and I love the introduction of kind of the triangle there. I think you had Rabin in part one, who's Dave Bautista, who's Stellan Skarsgård is like the Baron Harkonnen, the big bad ostensibly, but he's really not. He's kind of just a fat dude who sits around and sort of directs the Harkonnens from his seat there. And he's got the Skarsgård voice, which is very famous with Alex and Bill and all the Skarsgårds that are just coming out of the woodwork at this point. And it was an interesting dynamic between those two, and then Fade Rotha, who was introduced in this one, played by Austin Butler, who was fucking awesome. People clowning on that guy for the Elvis thing. I think you just found out about this, which is funny to me. Like it's been kind of mythologized over the last year or so, how he can't get out of the Elvis voice that he did.
He sounded like it. He still sounded like it in this movie, and it worked because he sounded like the Baron.
I kind of disagree. Yeah, but that's what he's doing. He was doing the Skarsgård. I thought he sounded like Alexander Skarsgård a little bit. Where he's,
I think that's convenient.
Yeah, it could be. Yeah, and he's like, "Oh, cousin, is that right?" Like I heard Alex Skarsgård in Generation Kill a little bit there. I thought that was great.
Fran very adamantly just said it was Elvis. So we saw the movie together. Obviously, we go to Towson, go see it, and when she realized that Fade was Austin Butler, she went, "Oh God!"
Did she not? Did she not know like before going in?
I don't think she had no idea Austin Butler was in it. Or she said, "Give me a break." Yeah. And then the guy sitting next to us started laughing because, I mean, I don't know. Austin Butler's in everything right now. And I think that's what Villeneuve ended up saying. He was like, the actors that I've selected, the younger actors in this, Florence Pugh, Timothée Chalamet, Austin Butler. I think he cited one more, Zendaya, duh. He was like, these are the superstars of the future. Like, I feel like these are the 4 best actors to embody the next generation of, superhuman superstars. And Austin Butler was badass, very cool, very well done. And Timothée Chalamet feels like he is in another stratosphere right now because of what you mentioned, the depth of his ability to bring that strength. I feel like he could possibly end up being a bigger superstar than like Leo DiCaprio.
Yeah, he's in, if anyone has Apple TV, he's in the Masters of the Air miniseries made by the Band of Brothers people, which is like the bombing campaign over Europe for World War II, which is one of the best books I've ever read. They're adapting it now. That's a good series, and Austin Butler stars in that. He is kind of doing the Elvis thing in that one for sure, because he's like playing a fighter pilot from like Tennessee or something like that. And he's fantastic in that. But yeah, and people are kind of having the take that like, man, what a great villain. Like, he could have been the Joker if he was on screen a little bit more. And I think it's interesting because like the way that he plays off of Paul, and then when you get to the ending and kind of the way that Paul kind of almost has him a little awestruck, maybe a little more than awestruck in their dynamic there. Maybe there's something more going on. It maybe paints a picture of where the story is going to go, because Paul dispatches of him pretty easily. That's an awesome scene in the book too, by the way. When
I don't think it was easy.
No, well, yeah, not easy. His hand got a little carved up there, and then
he got stuck in the gut.
Well, yeah, and then he takes it out, and then he stabs him with it. That's so like
that was the only criticism I have. I don't know if this happened in the book, then this might have been why everything has happened this way. If that was the drop the knife has now happened in Game of Thrones with Arya dropping the blade, and then Star Wars as well, drop down the saber and stick it in, and that was the only thing in the entire movie that I was like,
he doesn't drop it. He takes it in the ribs, and then like he has, I guess Fade gets his other one and he stabs him with it. He's like thinks he's about to stab him with it, he's like got him in the face. I think as he's like about to take it to the face, he like takes it out of his, if I'm remembering the book right, I read it like 3 years ago, takes it out of his ribs, stabs him in turn, and then that basically stifles him, and that's the end of it, which was really well choreographed, and they had it going up against the the setting sun there made that knife chipping shatter.
It was good, and that was another one where the mixing was so fantastic of the entire fate of like the universe being in that room, and the breath of the lack of breath of all of the people, the onlookers there, the Emperor, his crew, Florence Pugh, all of them, and then obviously all of Muad'Dib's or whatever the hell his name is, people like they were all like, doing such a good job being like, oh my God, this is the scariest thing on earth. And the audio of that fight was really good. And the fight itself was definitely good too. I think Austin Butler says, any special requests for your pet or something like that about Zendaya. Yeah. And that was a nice little line there too, but awesome scene. Definitely.
And you have the Emperor in the corner over there. Paul,
was it Portnoy who was going on about how Christopher Walken like ruined the movie?
No, yeah, he did say that. That's such an unfair. He didn't do anything. Like he didn't even really do the Walken voice that much.
Walken does his he gets into that.
Underestimates my Sardaukar.
Yeah, I think of Joe Dirt. Like in Joe Dirt, he does that so over the top on purpose because it's a goofy movie that if you compare those two, it doesn't even sound the same.
We're the only
I think Walken's eyes, the like shock in his eyes for how often he was like caught by surprise by everything was perfect because he just has that look to him. It always looked like he was shocked. Yeah, and then Paul walks up to him, makes him kiss the ring, and he's like stamping his feet. I was legitimately like kind of cowering my seat at Chalamet there. He sold that thing, man. I think I teared up at one point just because I was so stimulated by audio and visual theatrics there. It was truly, I had goosebumps. It was awesome. I think the only other movie that I've had that type of immersive experience with was Two Towers, Lord of the Rings. And I was like, I don't know, I was like 10 when that came out. So I'm going to give Dune 2 the dub there. I think like you said, I think it was the best movie I've ever seen in theater. Really the best movie I've ever seen. Yeah, it's right up there. And the Lord of the Rings comparisons, I think, are very apt. It's, very just dense kind of, people say unadaptable books. And then you get kind of I don't know. I really don't know where Peter Jackson was in his career when he made those, but I was a huge fan of those when I was a kid. I think I saw Two Towers in theaters. I definitely saw Return of the King. That was another one that was freaking awesome here, but it's a little bit different in tone. I mean, this movie's kind of a downer compared to those in a big way. Cause the way that it ends and he launches a holy war against the entire galaxy. He's a very different character than Frodo per se, but the scale and the scope and all the stars involved, it definitely Lord of the Rings is the only comparison you can really make here. Definitely. And I think I will say 3, I guess I was going to say 2, Rebecca Ferguson and Javi Bardem are Rebecca Ferguson was devastatingly good in this movie. I think she might've delivered the strongest performance overall. When you think about it, her ability to go into the Reverend Mother and just change her entire persona and the way they presented her overall was those two were like the kickers to me. How good they were. Too. The unborn fetus portrayed in the future by Anya Taylor-Joy, confusingly, but she was the voicing in that I thought was interesting. I think they opened the movie on that, which is like if there's any doubt that this was going to be kind of a weird story, that'll tip you off right there. It will. Josh Brolin also super badass in his role as Gurney there. So that kind of like. Josh, he's not on screen as much. He's not as part of the primary story, but like those 3, I think were really a kicker in terms of the performance that was delivered by the cast. Just outstanding overall. And Bourdin and Zendaya and the lightness that they brought. One of my favorite parts is the lightness in the dialogue. Some of the cheesy moments in the dialogue weren't too cheesy. Like, right. That's and always it gives it the necessary amount of heart because like I said, this is like a dark ass story. And like, there's a lot, it's a very self-serious sci-fi. It's not like this Marvel thing where it's like, something, somebody wipes out a depot and it's like, oh, got to get a new depot. Like there's not a lot of like punchy moments like that or like zinger moments like that. So to have like the Bardem performance where he's just completely sold on this guy as the Lisan Al Gaib, Messiah figure. And he's just like all the memes going around about him now are great too. Zendaya I thought was great too. She brought a really like kind of human element to it where Paul is just kind of slowly losing his shit. And this isn't really like, that's another deviation from the book that I think works really well. Cause in the book, she is like pretty much all the way bought in, even at the end with the twist there, where he kind of takes Irulan as, a political move as his wife there.
Shawnee is pretty bought
So
into that.
Johnny is pretty much as bought in as Stilgar then in the book.
Yeah, yeah. And Stilgar, like that's another thing. I think he plays it up a little bit more in the movie than he does in the book. I think he's a little bit more stoic about it, but he is kind of, he is sort of that believer of like the older group of the Fremen, and like the younger ones don't believe that. I think they explain that well in the book as well. But yeah, I think it was
they made some the conservatives or whatever.
Yeah,
traditionalists. That's what.
Yeah, that line that she has where she's like the older people.
Fundamentalists. There you go.
Fundamentalists. Yeah, she's like where the older people are going to, believe in that kind of more than the younger people are, and how like messiahs are like, they're basically made to put us down and keep us in the dirt. Like that. I think that was lifted right from the book, and that explains the dynamic pretty well.
And really, I mean, you do see so much of what Marvel has done and Star Wars of, I feel like, just ripping off like freaking. What is, oh my God, the character in Marvel, the time guy.
Oh, Doctor Strange, is it?
Doctor Strange, like he has the 100 billion. I've run 100 billion different visions, and this is the only one that works. Yeah. Clearly, that is inspired from Dune.
It's funny too, because like people say that, and I totally get it, but it's also like Dune takes a lot of the shit like right from the Bible, which it probably also
there's no original stories. Everything was written by Shakespeare or religious text and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, I don't want to gatekeep
the Iliad and stuff.
Yeah,
like that.
I don't want to gatekeep too much, and I don't want to.
No, it's not that, but it just shows how profound I feel like the plot is, and how much it's referenced. And again, there's no original thoughts anymore. So
yeah, there's a lot of that, and there's a lot of this was one of my favorite Game of Thrones things. Where it's like, oh well, if you read the books, you would know, or if you read the books, you'd know what was coming. Like, just let people enjoy it as they enjoy it. I think that's a good message.
It doesn't make you like a better person for reading the book before seeing the movie.
Recommend them though. They're good. The first one is it's a little dense. It's like 500 pages. It takes some time to get through. Messiah is a little short. I was telling you this offline. Messiah is a little shorter, a little more action, I think. And it completes the story in a nice way. I'm excited to see where they go with it. There's a little bit of a time jump. We'll see what Chalamet is going to look like in a couple years here.
Yeah, I was anticipating that because I imagine that they're going to bring in Anya Taylor-Joy as, what is it, Aliyah Atreides.
Yeah. I always said Aliyah,
yeah. So I anticipate her being in the next one, and Chalamet is supposed to be older and have a sister and whatever the hell goes on with her. And now I'm thinking about that, I feel like I can imagine what the plot is of that, and some weird Bene Gesserit or whatever the fuck it's called. Shenanigans go on there with them trying to take control over him again and things like that.
And you mentioned the supporting characters. Exciting supporting character from the first one may or may not be coming back in a very weird way, which I think will resonate well.
Definitely. So, I mean, really just overall can't recommend it more. I'm probably going to go see it again in theaters at some point here throughout its run. Was awesome. I saw it in one of my favorite theaters, Towson. I think Towson. Is that where you saw it too?
Yep. Yeah. Me and the boys went to a World of Beer, had a couple pints, and then went to go see it. Got a jumbo popcorn.
I love that theater. So couldn't recommend more. If you had it all spoiled for you and decided to stick around, definitely go see it. And I'm probably going to see it again. And like I tweeted it last night. I was like, I'm sad I never get to see Dune 2 for the first time again, because it was that good in theater. And man, it was like a generational movie experience, I feel like. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like Star Wars to Lord of the Rings, that's like 20 years, and then Lord of the Rings to this, that's like 20 years. So yeah, go see this in theaters, enjoy it. And we don't get these types of movies very often. There's been a lot of really, really good ones over the last couple of years that I've enjoyed, but a franchise like this in particular, like every couple of years getting one of these, it's pretty special stuff. So only one more to go.
Yep, one more to go. The old trilogy. Man. Now I really want to go see it again. I could watch it right now.
I mean, man, I'm gonna try to finish the. I started Children of Dune, which is the third one. Which I'm not gonna spoil it, but it's further down the line and it's different. It was pretty good. I do want to finish that though. But the first two, yeah, they were excellent. So
love it.
Get into the book.
Oh, I guess that's our first little off-season movie recap. We're gonna try and do one a month. We'll try and figure one out ahead of time so that you can join us in the conversation for next time. So. I guess that was our March recap potentially. So we'll try and get one for April and have a lot of fun stuff coming up. Orioles opening day. I think the tailgate has sold out, unfortunately. So if you didn't jump on that train, then see what we can do. But we'll be there and we'll see you at the park potentially, and lots of good stuff. Orioles on the way, Ravens draft, all that good stuff. So we'll keep on firing.
Yep, we are through the Rubicon. It will be daylight savings time the next time we record. How does that make you feel?
golf season is upon us. My game couldn't be in a worse spot. So excited.
Good
but
time. You can rebuild as the season progresses.
Hopefully. Got another Myrtle golf trip coming up in June. So we're doing the whole Ryder Cup style thing there and gonna have some money on the line and things like that. So I guess it's better to hopefully bottom out now.
Gonna have the same amount of fun as you did last time?
Possibly. Probably not quite as much fun, but a very good time nonetheless.
Yeah, that sounded really fun. It sounded like you had a lot of fun.
I did have a good time there. So we'll be in the Dirty Myrtle in June, hitting some golf balls.
Okay. All right. Well, that was our Dune 2 review and our look ahead. Thank you guys for anyone who stuck through that. Close to 300 concurrents here hanging with us. So hope you all saw the movie. If not, go and still see it, even if you had some of it spoiled. It's a movie that can only be experienced. The plot is great, but it's not a prohibiting factor. So go and check it out. Thank you for tuning into the rest of our chatter on Justin Madubuike being tagged on some of the Combine recap talk. It was great fun as always. So shout out to all our sponsors as well before we get out of here. Jimmy Seafood, you mentioned the Tailgoat. Maybe see if you can get some tickets on the secondary market there. Shout out to Black Eyed Susan Spices, Fed Thrill, all our people. We appreciate y'all very much, and we will talk to you, the listeners, again very soon.
See you.
Arrivederci.
Really, really hard, and they execute the system, and that's what it's all about.
Yes, sir.
Trust.
He's pretty big trust.
Big trust, baby.
Hey, yes, sir. Right on cue. Hey, let me.